The winter light cast long shadows across the snow-dusted walkway as Ethan Lane approached the imposing brownstone. His breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as he hesitated at the ornate door. This wasn't his world, these manicured hedges, these polished stone steps. The woman who opened the door mistook him for the maintenance staff, her eyes dismissive as she began to direct him toward the service entrance. Only when he mentioned his sister's name did her expression shift from indifference to embarrassment. Little did either of them know that this awkward case of mistaken identity would forever alter the course of 3 broken lives. Stay with us to witness an extraordinary journey of healing and connection. You won't believe the moment when a forgotten act of kindness returns in the most unexpected way, or how a child's silence speaks volumes about what truly matters. Sometimes the most profound beginnings start with a simple misunderstanding. 42 years had etched fine lines around Ethan Lane's eyes, lines that deepened when he smiled, which had been rare these past few months. 8 years a widower, he had mastered the art of moving forward, one careful step at a time, building a quiet life around his daughter Lily and his elementary school classroom. Teaching had been his anchor, his purpose, the place where his gentle patience transformed young lives. Then his mother had passed 3 months ago, a peaceful end after a long illness, but a loss that had reopened old wounds. The school had understood his need for space, granting him a semester's sabbatical to grieve and find his footing again. His 10-year-old daughter was staying with his sister Rebecca temporarily, giving him room to breathe through the hardest days. This morning he'd agreed to fill in for Rebecca as a favor, stepping into her role as caretaker for a child in one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. It was a far cry from his modest apartment and the elementary school classroom where children's artwork brightened institutional walls. The woman at the door regarded him with cool blue eyes. "Mr. Lane? I was expecting Rebecca." "She's ill today. I'm her brother, Ethan." He offered his most reassuring smile, the one that had calmed countless anxious kindergartners. "I'm a certified elementary school teacher, currently on sabbatical." Claire Carter's posture remained perfect, controlled, as if any relaxation might cause something vital to crumble. Inside, the house was immaculate, beautiful but sterile, like a museum where life was exhibited rather than lived. In the kitchen, a small figure sat at the table, dark hair falling in neat braids against a pristine uniform. The girl didn't look up when they entered, her gaze fixed on an untouched bowl of cereal. "Lila, this is Mr. Lane. He'll be staying with you today instead of Miss Rebecca." Claire's voice softened when addressing her daughter, though the formality remained. Lila's eyes, the same penetrating blue as her mother's, flicked up briefly, then returned to her cereal. No smile, no greeting. Just a momentary acknowledgement of another adult passing through her world. In the days that followed, Ethan would learn what lay beneath the silent exterior of both mother and daughter, wounds that ran deeper than he could have imagined, and courage that would ultimately take his breath away. The first day with Lila passed in near complete silence. After Claire left for work, a sleek business card on the counter identifying her as CEO of Meridian Publishing, Ethan attempted various conversational approaches. He asked about her favorite books, suggested games, offered to explore the garden. Each overture was met with the same blank stare, or, at most, a non-committal shrug. By mid-morning, he changed tactics. Instead of trying to draw her out, he simply settled into the quiet alongside her. He found a book on the shelf and began to read silently. Occasionally, he would chuckle at a funny passage, or make a small sound of interest. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Lila watching him with cautious curiosity. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" he asked during their first real breakthrough moment. "I make a pretty mean hot chocolate, with tiny marshmallows, if your mom keeps them around." To his surprise, Lila nodded, a small gesture, but the first direct response he'd received. As he prepared their drinks, he hummed softly, an old lullaby he used to sing to his own daughter. The kitchen felt too perfect, too untouched. No drawings on the refrigerator, no evidence of family life beyond the expensive appliances and designer fixtures. "When my daughter Lily was about your age," he said conversationally as he placed a steaming mug before Lila, "she went through a phase where she only wanted to eat purple foods. Purple grapes, blueberries, which aren't actually purple, but she made an exception. Purple cabbage. I even made purple pancakes with food coloring once. A flicker of interest passed across Lila's face. She reached for the marshmallows he'd set aside, adding them one by one to her hot chocolate. When she took her first sip, a chocolate mustache formed on her upper lip. Ethan fought the urge to wipe it away, instead touching his own lip. I think you've got a little something. Lila's hand flew to her mouth. And then, so suddenly it startled them both, a small giggle escaped her. The sound was rusty, unpracticed, as if her laughter had been locked away for so long it had forgotten how to emerge. From the kitchen doorway came a sharp intake of breath. They turned to find Claire standing there, clutching her portfolio, her expression one of naked shock. Of Carter, Ethan stammered, rising. I didn't hear you come back. I forgot some documents. Her voice was strained as she stared at her daughter. Lila, did you just... The little girl's face closed off immediately, the brief moment of lightness vanishing like smoke. In the hallway, Claire gripped Ethan's arm with surprising strength. That's the first time she's laughed in over a year, she whispered, her professional composure cracking. Since her father died, she's barely spoken. The therapist said she'd come around in her own time, but... Her eyes sought his, suddenly vulnerable. What did you do? Nothing really, just talked to her. Made hot chocolate. Claire studied him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. Are you sure we haven't met before? Before today? Ethan shook his head. I don't think so. I would remember. Something like disappointment flickered across Claire's face. Could you possibly come back tomorrow? I know it's not your regular job, but... Of course, Ethan found himself saying, though he hadn't planned to continue this temporary arrangement. If it helps Lila. What began as a one-day favor stretched into a week, then 2. Each day, Ethan arrived at 8 and left at 5, establishing a gentle routine with Lila. Mornings were for academics, reading, writing, and math activities disguised as games. Afternoons were for creativity, art projects, music, and explorations of the small garden behind the house. Though Lila remained largely silent, small changes emerged. She began to respond with nods or head shakes. She would reach for books she wanted to read or art supplies for projects she preferred. Once, when Ethan mentioned missing his own daughter, she patted his hand awkwardly, a gesture of comfort that nearly brought him to tears. Claire, too, began to soften around the edges. She started coming home earlier when possible, hovering at first on the periphery of their activities, then gradually joining in. One afternoon, she arrived to find them baking cookies, flour dusting the countertops of her immaculate kitchen, the air sweet with vanilla and chocolate. I should have asked permission, Ethan began apologetically, but Claire waved him off. It smells like... She paused, swallowing hard. It smells like a home. That evening, after Lila went to bed, Claire invited Ethan to stay for a glass of wine. As twilight deepened outside the tall windows, she revealed fragments of the story she normally kept locked away. Her husband James had died in a car accident 18 months ago. Lila had been in the car but escaped with minor physical injuries. The emotional wounds, however, had proven far more difficult to heal. She stopped speaking entirely about 6 months ago, Claire explained, her fingers tight around the stem of her wine glass. Right after we moved here from our old neighborhood. The therapists say it's selective mutism, a response to trauma. They keep telling me to be patient, but sometimes I wonder if I'll ever hear her voice again. She's still in there, Ethan assured her. Today she helped me choose which book to read. She has opinions, preferences. She's just found it safer not to express them out loud. How do you know so much about this? Claire asked, studying him over the rim of her glass. My wife died when our daughter was 3. Cancer. The words still caught in his throat even after 8 years. Lily stopped talking for a while too. Not as long as Lila, but long enough to terrify me. Children process grief differently than adults. Sometimes silence is the only response that makes sense to them. Something shifted in Claire's expression, recognition perhaps of a shared experience that transcended their obvious differences. I should go, Ethan said, rising. It's getting late. At the door, Claire hesitated. "There's something familiar about you," she said softly. "I can't shake the feeling that we've met before." Ethan smiled. "Maybe in another life." The breakthrough came during their third week together. Ethan had introduced Lila to an emotion journal, a simple notebook where she could draw pictures representing how she felt each day. Claire had been skeptical at first, she has a therapist for that sort of thing, but had relented when Ethan explained it wasn't therapy, just another form of communication. That afternoon, while Claire was at work, Lila fell while running in the garden. It wasn't serious, just a scraped knee, but the shock of the fall triggered something deeper. She began to cry, not the quiet tears Ethan had occasionally witnessed, but great, heaving sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. Ethan gathered her into his arms, rocking her gently as she cried. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let it out. I've got you." And then, in a voice raspy from disuse, Lila whispered, "It hurts." Ethan froze, afraid that any reaction might cause her to retreat again. "Your knee?" She shook her head against his chest. "Everything. I know," he murmured into her hair. "I know it does. Daddy's not coming back." "No, sweetheart, he's not. And Mommy's always sad." Ethan's heart constricted. "Your mom loves you very much. Sometimes, grown-ups don't know how to show their feelings." "Like me?" Lila pulled back to look at him, her face tear-streaked but somehow lighter, as if speaking had released a terrible pressure. "Just like you," Ethan confirmed. "But you're talking now, and that's very brave." Lila considered this. "Can we call Mommy? To tell her?" When Claire arrived home 30 minutes later, her face was flushed from running up the front steps. She burst through the door, wild-eyed, having left an important board meeting, based on Ethan's cryptic text. "Come home when you can, something important has happened." "What is it? Is Lila okay?" The fear in her voice was palpable. From the living room, Lila's small voice called out, "Mommy, I made you a picture." Claire froze, her handbag slipping from her fingers to the floor with a thud. Slowly, as if moving through water, she turned toward the sound of her daughter's voice. Lila stood in the doorway, holding a piece of paper covered in colorful crayon scribbles. "It's us," she explained, "you and me and Mr. Ethan, in the garden." With a choked sob, Claire fell to her knees, opening her arms. Lila ran into them, and Claire held her daughter as if she might never let go, her body shaking with silent tears. And over Lila's head, Claire's eyes met Ethan's. In them, he saw gratitude so profound it bordered on reverence. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. That evening, after a celebratory dinner where Lila chattered with the pent-up energy of months of silence, Claire asked Ethan to join her on the patio. The night was cool but clear, stars visible even through the city's light pollution. "I need to show you something," she said, rising and disappearing into the house. When she returned, she carried a small wooden box, which she placed carefully on the table between them. "After James died, we moved across town. Lila started at a new school. She was struggling, not speaking much, but still functioning. One day, she came home with this." Claire opened the box and removed a letter, handling it as if it were infinitely precious. She handed it to Ethan. The paper was worn at the creases, obviously read many times. The handwriting was unmistakably his own. "Dear brave one, sometimes the world feels too big and too scary. Sometimes we lose people we love, and it hurts so much we think we might break into pieces. But you are stronger than you know. Your heart is like a lighthouse. Even when the storm rages, the light inside you keeps shining. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to not know what to feel. All your feelings are important, and they all deserve space to breathe. When you're ready, and only when you're ready, your voice will come back to you, and when it does, the world will be so happy to hear what you have to say. Until then, know that you are loved, you are seen, you are not alone. With care and belief in you. Mr. E." Ethan's hands trembled as recognition dawned. "I wrote this," he whispered. 2 years ago, there was a little girl at our school. We never knew her name. She'd lost someone and stopped speaking. The counselor mentioned it in the teacher's lounge. I wrote this letter and asked her to pass it along. That was Lila, Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. After James died, I enrolled her in a new school, hoping a fresh start would help. That letter? She carried it everywhere for months, slept with it under her pillow. It was the only thing that seemed to comfort her. I had no idea. When she transferred again after we moved here, the letter got lost in the shuffle. She was inconsolable. That's when she stopped speaking entirely. Claire wiped a tear from her cheek. And then you walk into our home and she laughs for the first time in over a year, speaks for the first time in 6 months. I never knew if the letter helped, Ethan admitted. The counselor said the girl had transferred schools, and I always wondered. It helped, Claire said simply. It was the kindest thing anyone did for her during that time. She reached across the table, covering his hand with her own, for both of us. Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition, a connection forged through a child's pain and healing. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 4 weeks into Ethan's time with the Carters. "Mr. Lane." The principal's voice was warm with familiarity. "I hope your sabbatical is going well. The reason I'm calling, there's been a development I thought you should know about." Ethan listened, his stomach tightening as Principal Morris explained. The school board had approved an unprecedented budget increase. All teachers would receive a substantial raise in the coming year, with additional funds for classroom supplies and professional development. "We'd love to have you back for the new term, Ethan. The children miss you, and frankly, no substitute has matched your connection with them. And with the new salary scale, well, it would solve a lot of problems for you and Lily, wouldn't it?" It would. The financial struggles of single parenthood had been a constant undercurrent in Ethan's life. This raise would mean security, stability, a college fund for Lily that didn't require second jobs and constant worry. "Can I have some time to think about it?" he asked. "Of course, but we'll need your decision by Friday. Planning for the new term starts next week." After hanging up, Ethan stood at the window of his apartment, looking out at the city skyline. Returning to teaching had always been the plan. His sabbatical was temporary, a pause to grieve his mother and reset. The school, his colleagues, his students, they were the constants in his life. But now, the thought of leaving Leela and Claire created a physical ache in his chest. That afternoon, as they worked on a science project in the Carters' kitchen, Ethan found himself watching Leela with a mixture of pride and melancholy. In just 1 month, she had transformed from a silent, withdrawn child into this animated, curious girl who now peppered him with questions about everything from dinosaurs to distant galaxies. And Claire had begun to open up too, about her struggles as a single mother, about the crushing responsibility of running a company while raising a grieving child, about her own unprocessed pain over James's death. Somewhere along the way, their professional relationship had evolved into friendship, and perhaps, lately, into something more. "Mr. Ethan?" Lila's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You're not listening." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. What were you saying?" "I asked if we could go to the Science Museum tomorrow. They have a new dinosaur exhibit." "That sounds fun, but you should check with your mom first." "Check with me about what?" Claire appeared in the doorway, home earlier than usual. Her smile faded as she caught sight of Ethan's expression. "Is everything okay?" "Mommy, can we go to the Science Museum tomorrow, please?" Leela bounced in her seat. "Let me talk to Mr. Ethan first, okay? Why don't you go wash up before dinner?" Once Lila had left the room, Claire turned to Ethan. "What's wrong?" He hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I got a call from my principal today. They want me back for the new term, with a significant raise." "Oh." Claire's face went carefully blank. "When would you start?" "Planning begins next week. Classes the week after." "I see." She busied herself with removing her coat, hanging it with precise movements. "Well, that's wonderful news. Congratulations." "We always knew this was temporary," she said briskly, not meeting his eyes. "Lila's speaking again. She's made tremendous progress. She'll be fine." "Will you?" The words escaped before he could stop them. Claire stilled, her back to him. "Of course. We were managing before you came. We'll manage after you leave." The formality in her tone was like a physical barrier between them. This was the Claire he'd first met, controlled, remote, protecting herself from vulnerability. "I haven't given them an answer yet," he said. Now she turned, her expression softening slightly. "But you will. And you should. It's a good opportunity, Ethan. Stability for you and Lily." She was right, of course. The practical choice was clear. Yet as he drove home that night, the right decision had never felt so wrong. The next day passed in strained normalcy. Ethan and Lila worked on her reading skills in the morning, then baked cookies in the afternoon. When Claire came home, she maintained a careful distance, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. After Lila went to bed, Claire handed Ethan an envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Your final payment plus a bonus for everything you've done for Lila." The business-like transaction stung. "Claire, I didn't do this for money." "I know," her voice softened. "But I want to make sure you know how much we value what you've given us." "We, not I." "I should go," he said, suddenly needing to escape the suffocating formality between them. "Early day tomorrow." Claire nodded, maintaining a careful distance as she walked him to the door. "Will you come say goodbye to Lila tomorrow afternoon? Before you make your decision final?" "Of course." They stood awkwardly in the foyer, weeks of growing intimacy suddenly evaporated. "Ethan, Claire began, then stopped herself. "Thank you. For everything." He wanted to pull her into his arms, to tell her that the thought of leaving them was tearing him apart. Instead, he nodded stiffly and walked out into the night. At home, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the envelope untouched before him. Inside lay financial security, an acknowledgement of services rendered, a clean break, the proper ending to a temporary arrangement. With a sudden surge of frustration, he pushed the envelope away and pulled out a sheet of paper. If he couldn't say what he needed to say in person, perhaps he could write it. Just as he had once written to an unknown little girl in pain. "Dear Claire, some people come into our lives for a reason, for a season, or for a lifetime. When I agreed to help Rebecca that first day, I thought you and Lila would be, for a reason, a brief encounter, a good deed, nothing more. I never expected you both to become so essential to my happiness, to rearrange the furniture of my heart to make space for yourselves. I never expected to find myself at this crossroads, torn between the safe, familiar path and the one that terrifies and exhilarates me in equal measure. The practical choice is clear. Return to my teaching position, accept the raise, provide stability for Lily. It's the responsible decision, the one that makes sense on paper. But paper can't capture the way my heart lifts when Lila masters a new concept, or the peace I feel sitting with you on the patio after she's gone to bed. It can't measure what I would be leaving behind. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if there's a place for me in your lives beyond these borrowed weeks. But I do know that walking away feels like leaving home rather than returning to it. Whatever I decide tomorrow, please know this. You and Lila have healed parts of me I thought would stay broken forever. For that alone, I will always be grateful. With care, Ethan." He read it over, then carefully folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. Whether he would actually give it to her, he didn't know. Friday morning dawned gray and rainy, matching Ethan's mood. He called Principal Morris and asked for an extension on his decision, just until the end of the day. Then he drove to the Carter's house for what might be the last time. Lila greeted him with her usual enthusiasm, oblivious to the undercurrents between the adults. Claire had already left for work, leaving a note about being home early for their farewell dinner. The day passed both too quickly and too slowly. Ethan found himself treasuring every moment with Lila, mentally cataloging her expressions, her questions, the sound of her laughter. By afternoon, a leaden weight had settled in his chest. At 4 o'clock, as they were cleaning up from their art project, the doorbell rang. Ethan opened it to find a courier holding a large, flat package. Delivery for Ethan Lane? Puzzled, Ethan signed for the package and brought it inside. "Let's see what this is, shall we?" he said to Lila, who was watching curiously. The package contained a framed letter, his letter, to Brave One from 2 years ago. But now it was mounted alongside a new edition, a child's drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. Underneath, in Claire's elegant handwriting, were the words. To the man who gave my daughter back her laughter and showed me how to find mine again. Ethan stared at it, his vision blurring. Mommy and I made it, Lila said proudly. Do you like it? I love it, he managed, his voice thick. Mommy said we should give it to you to remember us, but I told her you don't need to remember us if you stay. Lila looked up at him, her blue eyes suddenly serious. Are you going away? Mr. Ethan. Owen Stanley. Before he could answer, the front door opened and Claire appeared, looking windblown and slightly frantic. I'm sorry I'm late, she said breathlessly. The meeting ran over and then traffic was... She stopped abruptly, noticing the framed letter in Ethan's hands. Oh, you got it. Ethan looked from the frame to Claire, his heart hammering in his chest. It's beautiful. Is Mr. Ethan leaving us, Mommy? Lila's voice was small but direct, the question hanging in the air between them. Claire knelt to her daughter's level. Mr. Ethan has his own job, sweetheart. His school needs him back. But we need him too, Lila insisted, her lower lip trembling. Lila, why don't you go up to your room for a little while? Claire suggested gently. Mr. Ethan and I need to talk. Grown-up stuff. You're going to make him leave, Lila accused, tears welling in her eyes. No one is making anyone do anything, Ethan interjected, setting down the frame and kneeling beside Claire. This is just a conversation, okay? Reluctantly, Lila trudged upstairs, glancing back at them with worry etched across her small features. When they were alone, Claire turned to him, her professional composure cracking. I'm sorry about the frame, Lila insisted. I should have asked if it would make things more difficult for you. It's not difficult, Ethan said softly. It's perfect. Claire's eyes searched his. You have to make your decision today, don't you? Yes. And you're going back to the school. It wasn't a question, but a statement of what she believed to be inevitable. Ethan hesitated. That was the plan. Something in his tone made Claire look up sharply. What? He took a deep breath. I wrote you a letter last night, after I left. He pulled the envelope from his pocket. It probably doesn't make any sense. It's just what I couldn't say out loud. Claire took the envelope with trembling fingers. May I? Ethan nodded, his throat suddenly dry. She read it once, then again, her expression shifting from uncertainty to something softer, more vulnerable. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. She stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. I don't want to be the reason you give up security, a career you love. What if there's something I might love more? The words hung between them, fragile and enormous. Claire stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes. When James died, I thought that was it. One chance at happiness, gone. I built walls around Lila and myself, kept us safe, kept us functional. Her voice wavered. Then you walked through our door, and everything changed. Let me finish, she said, her voice strengthening. I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable, at letting people in, but these past weeks, watching you with Leela, feeling myself come alive again. She drew a shaky breath. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. Ethan's heart soared. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you're considering an alternative to going back to your school, if you're thinking about staying, Claire faltered, then reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope of her own. I wrote something to... She handed it to him, her fingers lingering against his. Read it, please. Ethan opened the envelope, unfolding a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. Dear Ethan, there are practical reasons why you should take the teaching position. Security, stability, a return to the familiar. I respect those reasons. I would never ask you to set them aside lightly. But there are also reasons, less practical perhaps, but no less real, why the thought of you leaving creates a hollow space inside me that I'm not sure I can fill again. When James died, I thought I understood grief. What I didn't understand was how to live with it. How to be both a grieving widow and a present mother, both a capable CEO and a vulnerable woman. I built a life of careful compartments, never allowing myself to fully inhabit any single one, for fear the others might collapse. You changed that. You showed Lila how to express her feelings when words failed her. You showed me how to be present even when it hurts. You created a space where healing could happen, not through grand gestures, but through hot chocolate with too many marshmallows, through paper snowflakes on kitchen tables, through the simple act of bearing witness to our pain without trying to fix it. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if what I'm feeling is real or just gratitude magnified by circumstance. But I do know this. When you're here, our house feels like a home again. When you're here, I remember how to breathe. Would you stay? Not just for her, for me too. Claire. Ethan looked up from the letter, his heart full to bursting. Yes, he said simply. Yes, Claire's voice was barely audible. Yes, I'll stay. He moved toward her, closing the distance between them. I'll need to call the principal, make arrangements for Lily to join us here sometimes. Figure out what I'll do for work, maybe private tutoring or… Claire silenced him with a finger to his lips. We'll figure it out, together. And then she was in his arms, her face tilted up to his, her eyes asking a question his heart had already answered. When their lips met, it felt like coming home after a long journey, familiar and new all at once. They broke apart at the sound of a small gasp from the stairway. Lila stood watching them, her eyes wide with wonder. Does this mean Mr. Ethan is staying? She asks, hope making her voice tremble. Claire held out her hand, inviting her daughter to join them. Would you like that? Lila didn't answer with words. Instead, she ran to them, flinging herself into their embrace with such force that they all nearly toppled over. Ethan lifted her up, and the three of them stood in a circle of arms, of shared breath, of tentative new beginnings. You were never just temporary, Claire whispered against his shoulder. Outside, the rain had stopped, and late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in golden light. In that moment, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he had found his way home. Not to a place, but to these two people who had somehow become essential to him. 6 months later, the brownstone had transformed. Where once there had been sterile perfection, there was now joyful evidence of life being lived. Lila's artwork covered the refrigerator. Books and games spilled from shelves that had previously displayed only carefully curated objects. The garden behind the house bloomed with wildflowers that Lila had insisted on planting. Because they're free, like us now. Ethan had started a small tutoring service, working with children who, like Lila, needed more personalized attention than traditional classrooms could provide. His daughter, Lily, spent weekends and school holidays with them, forming a surprising bond with Lila, despite their age difference. Claire had restructured her work schedule, delegating more to be present for family dinners and weekend adventures. The rigid compartments of her life had given way to a more fluid existence where CEO and mother, grieving widow and new partner, could coexist without threatening each other. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Claire found Ethan on the patio, staring up at the stars. "Any for your thoughts," she said, settling beside him. "Just thinking about how life works out sometimes," he replied, drawing her close. "How the worst days can lead to the best ones. How temporary arrangements can become permanent." Claire smiled against his shoulder. "When you walked through our door that first day, did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" "Not in my wildest dreams," Ethan admitted, "but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." On the anniversary of their first meeting, Claire presented Ethan with a small, leather-bound book. Inside, she had collected memories from their months together. Lila's drawings, photographs, notes they had written to each other. The final page held a letter, penned in her elegant hand. "Dear Ethan, 1 year ago you walked through our door as a substitute, a temporary solution to a practical problem. You were supposed to be here for a day. Instead, you became our forever. Before you, grief was something Lila and I carried alone, in separate silences. You taught us how to share it, how to honor it without being defined by it. You showed us that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing around the wound until it becomes part of our strength rather than our weakness. Every day, I watch you build this family we've created. Not through grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but through 1,000 small moments of patience and presence. the way you listened to Lila's endless questions, the way you've welcomed Lily into our home as if she's always belonged here, the way you remember that I need coffee before conversation in the morning and silence before sleep at night. They say family isn't just blood, it's who loves you enough to choose you every single day. Thank you for choosing us, for showing us that healing isn't a destination, but a journey we take together, one step at a time. Oh, my love? Claire. Ethan read the letter twice, then looked up to find Claire watching him, her eyes soft in the lamplight. I've been thinking, she said, taking his hand, about making this official. Not because we need papers or ceremonies to be a family, but because I want the world to know what we already do, that we belong to each other now. Ethan's heart swelled. Are you proposing to me, Miss Carter? Claire smiled, the full, unguarded smile that still took his breath away. I believe I am, Mr. Lane. Instead of answering with words, Ethan reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Great minds think alike, he said softly as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a sapphire, the color of her eyes, of Lila's eyes, of the summer sky above them. Claire's laughter mingled with her tears as they exchanged rings right there in the living room, with no witnesses but the home they had built together. Later that night, as Claire slept beside him, Ethan lay awake thinking about the strange, winding path that had led him here. The grief that had never fully left him but had changed shape, making room for new joy. The temporary arrangement that had become his forever. The letter to an unknown child that had somehow found its way back to him, bringing healing not just to its recipient, but to its author as well. On his nightstand sat the framed letter that had started everything, now surrounded by family photos. Lila and Lily making cookies together, Claire laughing in the garden, the four of them at the beach last summer. Beside it lay the leather-bound memory book, open to Claire's letter, her words a testament to the family they had created from the broken pieces of their separate lives. Family isn't just blood. It's who loves you enough to choose you every single day. In the quiet darkness, Ethan made the same choice he had been making every day for the past year. He chose them, Claire with her hard-won vulnerability, Lily with her resilient spirit, Lily with her generous heart. He chose this life they were building together, not despite its imperfections, but because of them. Because real love, like real healing, happens in the messy, beautiful, ordinary moments of choosing each other again and again, when there is every reason to turn away but one compelling reason to stay. The knowledge that some temporary arrangements are always meant to be permanent. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Ethan woke to find Lila standing beside the bed, clutching her stuffed elephant. Dad, she whispered, testing out the name she had only recently begun to use. Can I show you something? Careful not to wake Claire, Ethan slipped out of bed and followed Lila to her room. On her desk lay an open notebook, her emotion journal, the one they had started together all those months ago. She flipped to the latest entry, a colorful drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. It's us, she explained, pointing to each figure in turn. You and Mom and me and Lily, and look. She turned to the first page where dark scribbles had once represented her sadness. I was so small then, in my feelings. You've grown, Ethan agreed, marveling at the contrast between those early dark pages and the vibrant illustrations that filled the book now. Lila nodded solemnly. You know what I think? I think Dad is watching us from heaven, and he sent you to us because he knew we needed someone to help us remember how to be happy. Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. What do you think about that? About having 2 dads, one in heaven and one here, with you? Lila considered this with the clear-eyed wisdom that sometimes startled him. I think I'm lucky, she said finally. Some kids don't even have one dad who loves them, and I have 2. As they stood there in the early morning light, Ethan realized that this moment of quiet understanding with a child who had once been silent with grief, was the true miracle. Not the grand romantic gestures or the life-changing decisions, but the small, sacred moments of connection that healed them all, one heartbeat at a time. Later that day, as the 4 of them planted flowers in the garden, Claire and Ethan working side by side while Lily helped Lila carefully pat soil around delicate seedlings. Ethan thought about all the families that existed in the world, some bound by blood, others by choice, some finding each other through chance encounters, others through years of shared history. All of them imperfect, all of them precious in their own way. He thought about the letter that had traveled across time and space to bring them together, about how a simple act of kindness, offered to a stranger in pain, had returned to him multiplied beyond measure, about how sometimes the most profound beginnings start with a simple misunderstanding, a case of mistaken identity, a temporary arrangement, a substitute stepping in for just one day. As if sensing his thoughts, Claire looked up from her planting, soil smudged across her cheek in a way that would have horrified the polished CEO he'd met a year ago. She smiled at him, a private smile full of promise and memory. And in that moment, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Not because fate had decreed it, but because they had all chosen it, day after day, through grief and joy, through silence and words, through the letters they kept and the love they built together. Have you ever been misunderstood only to find that the misconception led to something beautiful? Or perhaps you've experienced how healing can come from the most unexpected sources: a stranger's kindness, a child's wisdom, a letter written from the heart. Maybe you've discovered that family isn't always defined by blood, but by who stays beside you when the world feels too big and too scary. Remember Ethan and Claire's story when you face your own crossroads between the practical choice and the one your heart whispers to make. Remember Lila's journey from silence to speech, from darkness to light. Remember that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing around the wound until it becomes part of your strength rather than your weakness. And most of all, remember that sometimes the most profound connections begin with what seems like a temporary arrangement, a substitute stepping in for just one day, a letter written to an unknown child, a helping hand extended without expectation of return, because in the end, family isn't just blood. It's who loves you enough to choose you every single day.